I found them. We're gonna start, I see Senator Williams here. We're gonna call up Senate Bill 2471. And
It's not in it.
I'm going to let Senator Williams explain. I will say the you have before you, or you should have before you, a committee substitute that has a reverse repealer.
If I looked at the packet right, it does not. I would, my request is to put that in there.
Senator
Yes.
Williams?
Thank you. I can get really deep in this, and I'm gonna try to hit the high points, and as we go forward with it, since we got a reverse repealer. Senate Bill 2471 aims to establish liability protections for counties, municipalities, and other political subdivisions in the event of a cybersecurity incident, provided they adopt certain cybersecurity standards. The bill also extends a rebuttal presumption against liability to commercial entities that implement cybersecurity programs aligning with specified national standards. This bill comes to us, in simplest terms as I understand it, as a carrot. We have a lot of industries that are in support of this bill: Bankers Association, Hospital Association, automobile. These guys are already doing that, a lot in part because of national standards that are out there, like HIPAA and things of that nature. They're mentioned in the bill. We've got a lot of entities out there, state agencies as well as the private sector, that are not. As I've spent time in this space the last year, I've sat in front of people, good leaders, after cyber events, and we've done the best we can to try to put information out there that these resources are available, and it's kind of onced over. So by having this legislation, we hope this becomes top of mind. And my experience says it's not when we're going to have a cyber attack. It's not if, it's when. And the cost to mitigate is multiple times the cost to prepare beforehand. Simply put, I'll be glad to yield to questions, and I can go deeper if you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Well, and I want to say in our conversation, so that I think the committee and everybody understands what's before us. As you explained it to me, we're putting in standards, and if these standards, cybersecurity standards, are met, then there's immunity for the entity. Is that correct?
As I understand it, yes, sir.
Okay. And Senator Boyd, thank you, is saying rebuttable presumption. And for those that don't know what that is, if it's there, then the presumption is changed, and then you come back and prove it. The other side proves it. Correct, Senator Boyd? Okay. So I think we're toiling new ground. That's why we mentioned about maybe a reverse repealer, but I will open it up to any questions. No questions? Okay, do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Okay, that carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, I want to call up Senate Bill 2767, the Mississippi Opioid Settlement Fund, and it's pretty straightforward, but I'm going to let Senator Boyd explain it.
We've been monitoring how that a lot of those funds are done across the country. And so after a lot of thought and a lot of debate, we have made a suggestion on how we're going to make sure that these funds are spent really in the manner that we wanted them to, in the way. And so before you, the piece of legislation that you have, what it does is it sets up a commission, and that, or I don't know the net, or task force. It sets up a group of individuals that will be monitoring, an advisory council that will be making recommendations to the legislature in accordance with the terms of the settlement. They will be making recommendations and giving the legislature a list of programs that they think should be funded. Additionally, what that group will be responsible for is developing a plan for the state, giving what is the highest needs that the state should be spending the dollars on. And they'll be prioritizing that list for us using all the science. And if you'll look, this is a pretty hefty list. It's a 13-member advisory board, but then we've also added a numerous amount of advisors to the advisory board, an advisor to the advisory board. But we have added people across the spectrum. So on the board, just to let y'all know, we'll ask the Attorney General to chair this, as the settlement. We'll have the state health officer and the executive director of the Department of Mental Health as their co-vice chairs on this. Then we'll have 2 members appointed by the governor, 2 members appointed by the lieutenant governor, 2 members appointed by the Speaker of the House, 1 member appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, some of you may say, why do we have the court in there? It's very important that as we're looking at intervention courts across the state to do this. We also will have representatives from the Municipal League, the Association of Supervisors, and the Chief of Police, and the Sheriff's Association. And then from non-advisory members, we have members of the Prosecutors Association, Medicaid, Child Protection Services, Public Safety, Education, Community Mental Health Centers. And we'll have different judges and private sector representatives specializing in opioid intervention, addiction medicine, and recovery services. We also have given that advisory committee to add advisors as needed. Anyway, their terms will last. We've given some initial terms expire in 2027 with subsequent terms lasting 4 years. Other members serve 3-year terms, so we've kind of been staggering it out. They will hold their first meeting 90 days within the effective date of this action. And that's kind of how they'll function. They will be reviewing and approving funding proposals for opioid-related programs, setting spending priorities, ensuring compliances. One of the other pieces that's forth in here that I know from working on a lot of public health programs is that it's very important to monitor the impact, to look at that evaluation piece. And that's been something that states have really, across the country, have really looked at as to how they would do this. They would be making a report annually to the legislature, the governor, and the public on how these funds are being spent and how efficacious they're being spent. So that's kind of an overview of this, and I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to this.
So I have one question and then I'll open it up. So, and I may have missed it, has any of the money been appropriated at this point?
At this point, there hasn't been any money appropriated. We have 80 million, Mr. Chairman, I believe that's correct. I think it's 80 million right now.
And so when this is, so when they make the recommendations will be how to spend the money, and then the plan is to go through the legislature?
Then it would have to go back to the legislature. And the reason for it's kind of a check and balance on this committee too. We have great faith in a lot of our leaders that we have right now, but this is something that will extend basically until 2038. And so this makes sure that there's a plan in place, that they're doing this, and then it's up to the legislature to really review and make sure that those are good and appropriate expenditures. So it kind of puts a check and balance in that, and then gives us a lot of guidance into what really best practices are so that we can make sure that we abide by the terms of the settlement, because we don't want that money being clawed back and going back to these companies.
And yeah, before I open it up, does the Attorney General's office, Whitney, do y'all want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, we do appreciate y'all considering this model. As Senator Boyd acknowledged, we have a lot of money coming to the state from our opioid settlements, and this is as a result of these companies, manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies, doing harm to the citizens of Mississippi and citizens across this country. And so this money is supposed to be used for abatement, to treat and prevent opioid abuse. And that's what we want to ensure. We want to ensure we abide by the settlement agreement. And I think that this group can help inform the legislature of how to appropriate the money properly, and that we will see the best return on our investment there.
Any questions? Senator Simmons. Well, before I do that, I think, I'm sorry, Senator McCon had an amendment. Want to go to your? Okay. He doesn't then. Senator Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a comment. It's just good to hear at our highest or higher levels of government in this state, when we want to make sure we hold companies and manufacturers responsible for doing harm to Mississippians. And so it's really, really good that certainly with your leadership, and certainly with Whitney and all the people at the Attorney General's office showing a concern to do the right thing when Mississippians are harmed. So I just think that's really important. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Simmons. Senator Turner Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am thankful for your leadership. But look, is this the same? Are these
Not
the?
sure what's going on, but
No, I don't know. I was echoing Senator Simmons. Are these is this one of the lawsuits where the counties and municipalities had to opt in to participate?
yes.
And I think that I remember seeing some statistics where some areas were impacted more than others with opioid cases. And but now what we are attempting to do or proposing to do is to institute a fund, or if, I guess there would be a fund, and we would appoint individuals who would decide how those funds would then be dispersed. Is that correct?
I'll let Senator Boyd, or if she wants to defer to Ms. Lipscomb from the Attorney General's office, they can answer.
So there's three tranches of money, kind of, that I'd say with that. So 15% of these dollars went to locals, and they had to opt in on that. So that money has gone to them. And so if you look at that, if you got the sheet there, you'll look at, so 15% of that went straight to the state, and then another 15% went to the locals, and then 70% is this abatement and the abatement money. So in this fund that we're establishing, you'll have both the state money and the abatement money. That would be correct, right?
Well, the fund right now has nothing in it, so it's up to y'all to appropriate the money into or transfer the money into the fund. But I'll add on the local money, Senator, is that as Senator Boyd was explaining, 70% of the money is going to be used for abatement. That's what the legislature will appropriate. The 15%, there's another 15% that can be used for anything. And the other 15% that went directly to the locals, they can use it for anything. So they will receive that in the same yearly installment that we receive it. And I think the localities that were part of this settlement, it's based upon a formula how much money they get each year.
And all of that is, I think so, that is as per the court order.
That's all in the settlement agreement. And those settlement agreements are available online on our website if anybody wants to review them.
And so I guess my follow-up question would be, or I guess a concern is perhaps if this passes, that this group that is appointed to administer the fund, that I would hope that they would consider those areas that have been identified as having been hit more heavily with the opioid crisis in their disbursement analysis. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Have a motion? Oh, sorry, Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Boyd, thank you for your presentation. I walked in a little bit late, and you may have explained all this, but we talked the other day about the applicants and the folks that would be eligible, and I do read that the bill says they will vet all of the proposals and determine who's eligible, and then it says prioritize. If I'm a potential applicant and I may not be at the top of the list of the committee, am I still going to be submitted to the legislature for consideration? Or is it going to be only the ones that they want? If I qualify, but I'm not at the top of the list by this council, will I still be on the list to be considered, even though I may be low on the list? Is everyone included? I guess that's what I'm getting to.
First of all, I think all applications will be vetted if they comply with the terms of the settlement. I think that would be first and foremost what they're doing. And then, the way this would optimally function, Senator Hobson, is they would give us their highest list of priorities and but there's so many different areas that need to be impacted here. And I think, we don't have that they have to submit everything to us that meets the criteria. What I'm hoping that they will be putting at the top of the list are those things that is most important that we use those funds for. So we don't limit that they have to include everything. Now that is something we can, look at and work on, but I think what we are really wanting this committee to do and what other states have done and looking at their best practices is trying to make sure that we use it wisely, is giving them that option to list those things by priority in order. And so like things that we've thought about, that we've talked about is like, for instance, there's some things that you need to do a basic foundational level on, and maybe you don't need to fund this until there's work been done in other areas. So I think those are things too that this committee can help us filter out and do.
Well, look, I agree with the prioritization. I got no problem with that, but it may be that there's something the committee looks at and they've got the top 10 and number 22 down on the list. They qualify, but by the time it gets to the legislature, the 174 that are in these two chambers may decide. That's really important right now. We see, we're hearing from our constituents, we see something different. I would not want them to be excluded. I think that's very, very important that they may not be at the top of the list, they're likely not to get funded, but it could be that the legislature determines this is one that's really, really important for changing something that maybe the committee, these handful of people that are not, they're looking at it, but we're hearing from people all around the state. So I want to make sure that that's in here, that nobody is to be excluded. I don't care if they prioritize it, but nobody that qualifies is to be excluded from the list. And if that's not in there, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to, I'll,
Do you want to make
can't
that
tell, I will
amendment
make
now?
that amendment. I can't tell from the way it's worded that they will or will not be excluded, but I would like to say that no applicant that qualifies would be excluded from the list.
Yeah.
They may be at the bottom of their list.
And Senator Hobson, that's not in here, so I would definitely accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Boyd. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boyd, can you point to where that would be, the amendment would be optimum? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you're looking at line 29, it says the legislator may accept or reject each of the council grant recipient recommendations, but shall not amend or modify the recommended list of grant recipients. And I think that's limiting what Senator Hobson is talking about, saying that we can't amend or modify the list. So I think it would go. Yeah.
And with that, the goal of this is always that nothing is presented to the legislature that has not gone through the appropriate clearance to make sure it complies with the terms of the settlement. So that is part, DC, of the process to make sure of that, so.
Senator Hobson said he would get with you and write it all out, so. So, okay, you heard the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that amendment carries. Okay, any discussion on the committee substitute? All right, do I have a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass committee sub.
Motion is title sufficient, do pass committee substitute. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That carries. I'm gonna call up Senate Bill 2481. Since this is a bill that came through, it's come through a couple iterations. But I'm gonna recognize Senator Hobson. He understands what we've been through, and I think he has when I say what we've been through, what the bill has been about in the past, and he has a motion.
motion is to table, lay it on the table.
Okay, are there any questions on the bill? Okay, the motion is motion to table. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Okay, I want to go to, Senate, excuse me, Senate Bill 2484, custody, create rebuttable presumption. You have before you, also a committee substitute. I'm going to, in a second, turn it over to Senator Hickman, but I will say this bill, we had a version of it in the Senate last year. The House had a version of it. We couldn't reach a final agreement in the conference. I will state that, in talking with the chairman and the sponsor over in the House, the issue is this, is that in our courts, there is a desire that fathers be given equal treatment. Some will say they already do, a lot will say they aren't. And we already talked about a rebuttable presumption. You will see in the committee substitute that there's a rebuttable presumption to try to stand up, when I say stand up, to allow the law to address where fathers who want to be fathers and are involved in their children's life have a fair shot. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Hickman as it's his bill and to explain it further.
And so, yeah, I can be very brief. As he said, this bill passed out of this committee and off the floor, and both passed out of both chambers. I think it was pretty much unanimous in committee and on the floor. But basically, this creates a rebuttable presumption that both parents should be entitled to joint custody with equally shared parenting time. What it does is it allows the court to deviate. All they have to do is put in their opinion or in their order the reason that they deviated. It could be something as simple as the parents live too far apart, this wouldn't work, or they would still go through the Albright factors and say these factors lean for whatever. We also, the reason why we have a committee sub, we add an amendment that we added in this body last year. And what that amendment does, it looked like, and I don't know if it did, but it looked like this may affect irreconcilable differences, divorces, when both parents have come to a complete agreement. The amendment basically says that if both parents have come to an agreement, they've submitted something to the court, there's no further thing that needs to be done. And nobody has to put on the record why there was a deviation from that if both parents have come to an agreement. So that's basically what it does. It doesn't take away anything. I think I had some questions last time. It doesn't take away anything. It just adds a tool to the tool shed to say, judges, hey, look for equal parenting time. If that's not something that works, then just tell us why you didn't do that.
Senator Boyd has a question.
I got a lot of phone calls on this bill last year, after we passed it. And a lot of chancellors that were super upset. This is constructed completely different than the bill was last year. So thank you for the reconstruction of this, because I think we had some unconstitutional things in the one that was done last year. Have you talked to chancellors, though, is my question, because I had 4 call me just irate with the piece of legislation that we passed last year.
I can answer that.
I can't.
Okay, go ahead. Then.
I was gonna say, I mean, I've talked to my chancellors. None of them were against it. None of them were, equally excited. Chancellors already have a lot they have to put in their opinions and orders anyway. And again, we try to make it as less onerous as possible. Like I said, it could be what their deviation from this could simply say the parents live too far apart, this wouldn't work. Or they're going to go through the Albright factors anyway in a divorce. And so they could just say this leans toward that. So I try to make it as less onerous as possible, because if you look in the chancellery work, their chancellors are doing factors all the time with a lot of different stuff. My chancellors weren't against it. And I tell you, as a legislator, I will tell you this, I practiced before 3 different sets of chancellors. And every single time I'm before them, they call me back about something in legislation. I haven't gotten anything from this.
And I will say, yes, I received calls last year, kind of like you're talking about, but I think part of that issue was the bill in particular that came over from the House was much more, I would call it punitive, or took away the chancellor's discretion. The rebuttable presumption is in here. Now, I will say that rebuttable presumptions are probably used more there in well, in different, when you're actually in trial and all that stuff. So that's been put in here to address that. So it's not taking it away, it's still allowing it to be in the courtroom. I do think, and so I don't know that everybody, all the chancellors knew that last year because there was a lot going on, and that's why we ended up, it didn't make it out of conference because, I mean, it got down to the last day because we were having those discussions and the rebuttable presumption that's in there and what Senator Hickman's talking about, the ID needed to be addressed. So it is different from last year.
And I'd be willing to talk to any chancellor or whatever. Again, I practice primarily before more chancellors than I do circuit court judges, and I like to keep my chancellors happy.
Are there other states that handle family law in the same way that you're talking about?
Yes, I can get that information for you. Most states have a presumption like this.
Senator Boyd, I don't want to be, I want to be transparent. I'm not saying that every single chancellor's gonna agree with this, and you may actually get a call or two. But you've heard the discussion here, and those are, it's our job to make the law based on what we're doing. So I think a lot of it came out of nowhere last year, and so we're trying to adhere to what they're asking.
What we had last year treated men and women differently. So on its face, there was constitutional issues with that. But this treats everybody the same. Yeah. So, I mean, that was part of the issue with what we had last year. Okay, thank you.
Senator Barrett, you had a question?
I do, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly like the way the bill is, or the way it's moving, obviously. I do practice in Chancery Court and not wanting at all to stop the bill or cause any kind of pause, but I do wonder about the way our statutory guidelines for child support are set up. It's based upon non-custodial parent pays custodial parents based on the amount of children that you have. And does this bill set up for, I mean, who would pay child support, if any, if we have a rebuttable presumption? Obviously, the judge would make that determination, but if there's a rebuttable presumption that they shall share joint physical custody, then will the guidelines no longer be used, and will it be solely up to the chancellor, or will that be something we look at down the road?
I will say this. I don't remember if this came up. I remember a conversation about child support. I don't remember what the actual answer was, but I do know chancellors do have the ability to go outside the guidelines if there are reasons. So I think that's something we need to address, and I think that's something we need to work on because, like I said, I think I remember that conversation, but I don't remember where we were, and so I'm glad you raised that point.
Yeah, thank you. And I, Senator Boyd, to your question, I know there are states that have this in place, and I know there are countries that have this in place. So, anyway, thank you.
Senator Simmons, you had a question?
I was just asking, I guess lines 46 through 48, that addresses the ID issue we had last year. So that issue, this language addresses that, right? Okay, all right.
Okay, Senator Turner Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, I've encountered this statute before. And so I understand that this is referred to in the context of a divorce. But what about in those instances when the parents are not married and paternity has been legally established? I mean, I've tried to use it, but, technically, if the chapter in which it's located causes me to wonder, exactly what the application is. And so in light of that, unless I'm instructed otherwise that I'm making a mistake, I would like to be recognized to offer an amendment.
Okay, now's the time to offer the amendment.
I would just like to add language, perhaps at the, I can tell you what I would like to say, that this section of the code should also be instructive in instances where the parties are not married. Just for guidance. And I'm trying to figure out the best place to put it.
Well, I guess so on that, it does, but whether the parents are married or not, the custody applies. So whether they're getting divorced or two parents come in, or a person comes in and they're not married, but they have a child and you have to decide custody. So it applies.
Well, the reason I raised the issue is because Chapter 5, under Title 93, is entitled Divorce and Alimony. And so,
But okay, not to get into all that, but that's a title as opposed to the actual language. Council says that doesn't have weight.
Well, the title.
that would be my amendment.
So is your amendment that this applies to both a divorce and to parents of children who never were married and are in a custody situation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So we're on Senator Turner Ford's amendment. Is your question on her amendment? Does anybody want to speak on her amendment? Take it as a no. So we're on her amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the amendment passes. So we'll get that. Okay, we're back on the committee substitute. Senator Simmons?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add a reverse pillar.
Okay. So the amendment, we're on that. The amendment is a reverse repealer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Senator McCon, I heard you had a question.
Mr. Chairman, in light of time and the late time of the day, reverse pillar will handle my questions. I will get with Senator Turner Ford and Senator Simmons.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, do I have a motion? Motion title sufficient, do pass committee substitute. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, if you will, any committee member, I'm willing to work with you on getting this right. We want to get this right. We want to get it done. We want to get it done correctly.
And Senator Hickman has worked. He was a conferee last year. He's worked hard on it and appreciate it. All right, next we're going to go to, I think we got two left. Next we're going to go to Senate Bill 2438, State Employees Paid Parental Leave Act. Senator England, it's your show.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you putting it that way. Love the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Mississippi State Employees Paid Parental Leave Act. Just to give a brief explanation of what this does, for some state employees who have worked for a minimum of 12 months, 12 consecutive months, and are compensated on a full-time basis, they can be granted paid parental leave. The primary caregiver, meaning the person who primarily takes care of the child after the birth or the adoption of a child, can receive up to 6 weeks of paid leave. And the secondary caregiver, who is usually the father, honestly, that's where I ended up on this, will get up to 2 weeks of paid leave after the birth or adoption of a child. You can only take this leave once within a 12-month period. You know, barring any, I think there is an exception for certain circumstances, but you have to give your employer, the department or whoever you work for with the state, a 30-day notice that you expect to take the leave. And the paid parental leave may only be taken once in the period of 12 months from the birth or 12 weeks after the birth or adoption of the child. Each agency, department, and institution that's a part of the state of Mississippi should report on the paid parental leave annually. So we will be able to monitor this going forward. That's section 1 of the bill in a nutshell. The other parts of the bill mainly add reference to this state employee paid parental leave act. That's a basic explanation of the bill, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Senator England? Okay. Move is, motion is title sufficient, do pass. All in favor, say aye. All
Aye.
opposed? Chair's in doubt. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Next, we're gonna go to, Senate Bill 2769. I will call on Ethan to maybe help me on this one if we need it. But this is, the codification in a bill of the youth court task force report. Senator England served on that. As I've said in the other ones, we do have things we're working on, and so I would like a reverse repealer to be placed in here because we don't have one yet. But we did take the report and have put that into the bill here, which you've heard, some of them are in the standalone bills, some of them are in here. Also, like I said yesterday, there may be some jurisdictions written into here. We're still working on those. So I would ask for a reverse repealer in the bill. Okay. Moved. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right, we're on the bill on the committee substitute. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. Please forgive me, although the ayes are carrying right now, Senator Boyd. Yes, questions.
Mr. Chairman, this is something I know y'all have been working on, and there's various models out there, but y'all are looking at this. Is this the hybrid model? Is this the pure chancellor model?
The hybrid.
The hybrid model. And so for the hybrid, just to save ourselves a lot of phone calls, the hybrid model would keep the county courts in place, and then it would create chancellors where there's not chancellors, correct?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sorry if I work in the task force report. The task force recommended three options. Working with Ethan and talking to others, what is before you is the hybrid model. And that is, if there are the permanent youth courts that we have, that those wouldn't be replaced. And if you remember in the youth court report, there is the biggest number one recommendation that came out in addition to the intake was the referee system was not, quote, working. And so what this is trying to do is to replace the referee system with the chancellors. And if you remember last year with the governor put forward his plan that we would, because in part chancellors are constitutional, that we would place them in those areas. Those are details that need to be worked out. That's why we have the reverse repealer, but it is the hybrid model that was recommended by and let me say this, I think different people are referring to hybrid model, different ones. What we're referring to is what you described it as, Senator Boyd.
County court, state, county, and then new chancellors would be where there's not a county court, correct?
Yeah, correct. All right. Any other questions? Senator Barrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to ask this when every youth court bill we've had, and I know truancy is an issue. And I just hope, speaking on this, whatever model we take up, I hope that as a state, we can get a handle on truancy. And I know that's the lieutenant governor.
Well, we actually in education, are you on education?
I'm not.
Okay, so in education, we passed out yesterday what I call a big truancy bill. And I personally asked about the youth court and it being there. And so that is, I would encourage, that's on the floor, the truancy bill. So I would look at that. But
Thank
yes,
you.
that's been brought up. Okay, any other questions? All right,
I do have one.
okay.
So, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that we're going to continue to work with the redistricting to figure out how this is going to impact from here. Is that correct? All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, right now, the ayes are leading, so, do we have any noes? Okay, ayes are. So the motion was title sufficient, do pass, that passes. Committee substitute. Okay, then I think we have, 2879, I don't see Senator Hill here. I will do what I can in short, and she's been working with the Lieutenant Governor on this bill. This is in nonprofit shelters, and it's requiring disclosure of the, and records and transparency in those areas, in those shelters, and requires, proper record keeping and proper, accountability. So that's the bill. I have a motion. Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Okay, that carries. And last one, Senate bill, I'm gonna let Senator McCon, explain it, Senate Bill 2469.
All right, this has been going on for a couple of years now, and this is Senator Suber's bill this year to work on this. I do have two amendments at the proper time, Mr. Chairman, but it's just setting up the study committee. If there are problems out there, Senator Suber wants to find them and bring it to light and get this legislature to fix it. If there aren't problems, then he wants to put it to bed. And that's how he gave it to me to be done with this. You know, I think there's several other bills that come up several years we might want to do that with at some point. But that's what's going on with this bill right here. Mr. Chairman, I would have the amendments at the proper time.
Go ahead.
All right, so we do need to add in, so on line 12, where we have 3 members of the Senate to be appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, with 1 being a Chancery Clerk. And the second amendment on that would put in on line 14, 3 members, so 3 members, which should say 3 members appointed by, to be appointed. Let's clarify that. We want to add a Chancery Clerk, make sure a Chancery Clerk and a tax assessor in that. And I think the way they're worded right there, they don't really line up. So 2 members of the Senate to be appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, 1 Chancery Clerk to be appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, 2 members of the House to be appointed by the Speaker of the House, 1 tax assessor to be appointed by the Speaker of the House. That would be my amendment there. That way, those people who are on the front line dealing with this can have their input in this because they're the people that are out there all the time. And then you also have the Secretary of State, their designee. So that'd be my amendment. Sure.
Yes, Ethan, please restate the amendment.
So on line 11, it would be 2 members of the Senate, and then we'd add 1 Chancery Clerk by Lieutenant Governor appointment. And then on line 13, it'd be 2 members of the House by the Speaker, and then 1 tax assessor by the Speaker would be added as well.
That's correct.
So the total number would stay 7.
Stay the same number, yeah.
All right, we're on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That carries.
Title sufficient, pass committee sub.
Motion is sufficient. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Rise
that's it. Have a rise and report.
and report.
Rise and report. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank y'all very much.